Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm going to talk to you today about how and why the COVID-19 evolved in southern African nations twice. Now, there's a debate whether this Omicron variant did it evolve in Botswana or South Africa. Now, the first evolved strain that the world had, it was in South Africa. That has been determined. Well, at first, there was a lockdown that was implemented by the ANC-led government in South Africa, but it was largely ineffective, and here's why it was. Okay, you could not wear open-toed shoes during the lockdown. You could not go surfing on beaches. You couldn't gather at beaches. Never mind that the beaches are outdoor gatherings, and if you space out in beaches, you're not going to spread the COVID. Well, you couldn't do that, but then the taxis as well as the indoor malls were allowed to operate at full capacity. And Fikile Mbalula, the Minister of Transport of South Africa, had met with taxi unions without a mask and was not enforcing social distancing when he met with them. So the taxi unions were allowed to operate as pleased, and the mask mandate for taxi drivers and taxi passengers was not enforced. Also, the lockdown was not enforced in ANC government-friendly areas very well, but with opposition party areas, they typically were. Except the economic freedom fighters, they're areas where people largely vote for the EFF or the economic freedom fighters. That wasn't enforced there either. So that happened. Now, these other southern African nations, you have Namibia, Botswana, Lesotho, Eswatini, Mozambique, Zimbabwe. Well, a lot of these nations went with the AstraZeneca vaccine, even though it was discovered that the AstraZeneca vaccine, while it did well against the original strain of the COVID, it only offers about 15% protection against evolving COVID strains. Well, to the South African government's credit, they recognized it and then started getting Pfizer vaccines from the United States, as well as Johnson & Johnson vaccines, which protected the people from evolving COVID strains a lot better. They tried to warn other southern African nations like Botswana and Namibia and Malawi about that the AstraZeneca vaccine didn't work very well against evolving strains, but these other southern African nations and their leaders didn't listen. And they still went with the AstraZeneca vaccine, and that has caused problems, which is why the COVID spread rampantly in Malawi and Botswana and Namibia, despite people being vaccinated. They had the AstraZeneca vaccine against an evolving strain, which was not going well. But instead of the South African government not giving them the AstraZeneca vaccine, they still sold it to them in spite of the dangers and in spite of their warnings. And so that happened. Now, there was a lot of mass anti-vaccine hysteria in South Africa, which is why only 35% of the country had been vaccinated, which is a problem, and because I firmly believe that vaccines work. But here's the thing. Even though the ANC-led government was correct on which vaccine to use and encouraging people to get their vaccines, they've been incorrect on a lot of other things. First of all, the lockdown was horribly managed and had a bunch of silly, unnecessary rules, and it didn't help not spread the COVID because the capacity in malls weren't enforced. Neither was the capacity in taxis, as I talked about. They also released hardened criminals on the streets, but then put people in jail that didn't follow the lockdown rules or didn't wear the mask. Which the way to increase government revenue in that case is not put somebody in jail, but make them pay a fine. And then if they don't pay the fine, restrict them to house arrest after the lockdown ends, which they didn't do, by the way. All right, so we talked about that. So all that went on. But the ANC could not keep the lights on with their state-owned power monopoly, Eskom. They can't keep the lights on. And a lot of ANC areas where the ANC government runs South Africa, there are a lot of sewage leaks and water shortages. They can't keep the water running. So people were naturally skeptical of the vaccine, even though the ANC government was correct about it, because they had done so many other things incorrect. They denied there was a farm murder problem in South Africa, a murder of white farmers, but there quite frankly is a problem. of that. So there was a lot of mistrust in what the government was telling them, even though I firmly believe they were correct on the vaccine situation. So that's what happened, and that's why it evolved. It's not Afrophobia. It's mismanagement of a lot of different things. And that's why travel from these countries has been banned temporarily by the United States. South Korea implemented the same thing, the United Kingdom. Netherlands is not, as far as I know, but neither is, well, but a lot of countries have. I think Japan has as well. So anyways, hope everybody's doing well. Take care. God bless them. Bye. Bye-bye.